What's happening, guys? This is Logan Robinson from Here the Spear, presented to you by NoleGameday.com. We're here live on a wonderful, fantastic Wednesday afternoon, and we've got Thomas Castellanos drama with Alabama players. We've got former FSU quarterbacks talking about Thomas Castellanos and his comments. We've got Mark Ingram, former Alabama Heisman winner, going after Thomas Castellanos. We've got a lot to talk about regarding Florida State versus Alabama, which is going to kick off next month. We can officially say that now. That is July 2nd. A lot of things are happening. Florida State recruiting on a complete roll since the last time we recorded on here. A lot of stuff that Mike Norvell and the coaching staff have done, landing some commits, some of them being some big ones. Both Austin and D-Lou have some strong thoughts about a recent pickup for Florida State on the offensive side of the ball. And then we are going to jump into a couple of legacy commits that the Florida State Seminoles landed as well. Florida State predicted to land another big-time commitment later this afternoon. We will discuss that. And then we're going to talk about my guy, Jalen Ramsey, coming to my guys over in Pittsburgh, to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Going to jump into that. Of course, what a day that was to start off the week on Monday. I was at a coffee shop. I was going crazy, and I was just listening to Renegade all throughout the morning. Beautiful way to start the week. And then we've got Jameer Watkins getting selected in the NBA draft. We've got some basketball recruiting, too, from VZ. Terrence Mann has found a new NBA home. And then Malik Beasley, what is going on, man? He's going through some crazy stuff off the court. We'll finish off the show there with that and a handful of other things, too, that VZ has on the basketball side. But with me this afternoon is Austin VZ, our lead basketball writer at NoleGameday.com. And all the way over to the other side is Dustin Lewis, our editor-in-chief. Gentlemen, as we were talking about in the production meeting, we did not expect for us to have a show like this in July, but, man, it is jam-packed. We're going to be here for a little bit. How we doing?
It's going to be a busy one. Yeah, like you said, Florida State running it up on the recruiting trail, and at the same time, that Alabama season opener just 59 days away.
It's rare when we get an outline in July and it takes up this much on a sheet. It's a busy docket for July, but
it's a game week podcast.
It really is, but I'll take it.
Yes, we will take it. It's been a little dry, as it usually is in that May to June. But, man, it has been spicy, and we got to give a big shout-out to Thomas Castellanos. But before we get started, if you're on YouTube right now, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Also, too, if you're in the comments, if you have any topics or questions, or if you want to already jump into some FSU Alabama talk, feel free to throw it into the comments. We'll make sure to get back to that and put it on the screen and discuss. But if you want to hit that like button, it definitely helps get out to more FSU fans with us this afternoon. But let's waste no more time, gentlemen. Thomas Castellanos has created a pretty big buzz, I would say, not just across the FSU and Alabama fan base, but it's stretched across the college football landscape with his comments. We talked about it on last week's show, but he mentioned a lot about Alabama not having Nick Saban anymore as their head coach, and he feels very confident going into this season opener against the Crimson Tide, which D-Lou just said 59 days away. First off, I want to just jump into you guys. How are we feeling? We're in July 2nd. We're getting very close to where fall camp is beginning. Are you feeling any kind of good feelings about football coming soon? Are you getting that yet, or does that take until maybe NFL hits training camp for you guys? Then you start smelling that grass of football practice coming.
The excitement's definitely growing, but I think, Florida State coming off the season that they had last year, and then not being able to get a chance to go out there and view those spring practices, get an actual look at the team, kind of tempering my excitement a little bit as we get closer and closer to fall camp in a couple of weeks. And we'll see what they decide to do whenever that opens up, as far as if the media is going to be able to view any practices, or if it's going to be the same way as the spring. But, I think if anything, it's just cautionary, since we haven't gotten a chance to see this team. They made so many changes across the roster and the coaching staff. You really want to put eyes on the product before they kick off against Alabama.
Yeah, I think just coming off a 2-10 season, and neither Dustin and I are that high on the team going in next year. I think that's tempering the expectations more than anything.
You think I'm high?
I think you're higher than us.
Possible.
No, you think so? I don't know. I think, to me, and I was just thinking about this, I was in the same boat as you guys until Thomas Castellanos started chirping. I mean, no one was talking about Florida State versus Alabama, and if they were, it was Alabama by 1,000,000 points and everything. But to have Thomas Castellanos come in with some confidence that I think this team needs more than ever, where it was completely shot last year, is an upside for Florida State going into this first game, at least specifically. I mean, I felt like they lost a lot of that in confidence, and that's something that they need to have in this game going into it. He's a guy that comes with some talking, and then we've seen that before with guys. Like, we go back and go to like a guy like Jared Verse. He was a guy, though, that could back it up on the field, and he's doing that in the pros as of late too. But this is also too, I think people are so predicated, of course, yes, 2-10, and I understand that fully, but that was last year's team. This is a whole new revamped staff. This is a whole new revamped roster. You've got your quarterback coming in from a different school. It's a whole different team, and I think a lot of the responses from across the country going against Thomas Castellanos. Thomas Castellanos has played with that kind of attitude since he's arrived on the college scene. Yes, it's his first season. It's going to be his first season with Florida State, but it's a brand new roster, man. You got to try, and maybe he's sending a message to the locker room as well. Maybe he felt like maybe the spring kind of went into a 2-10 kind of vibe, and we're thinking too much about that. This is, you gotta reset the shockers, man. And I'll be honest with you, now that Tommy's been talking, now we're getting chirps from Alabama guys. They're laughing at him. They put out some emojis replying to what Thomas Castellanos said. You also had Mark Ingram on here saying, here's what Mark Ingram said, former Alabama running back, Heisman winner, one of the best there in the Crimson Tide, said about Thomas Castellanos: good for him. Let him run his mouth. Let him talk. You're supposed to be confident as an athlete, as a dog. He's supposed to be confident, so let him run his mouth and give them dogs at Alabama a reason to go in and make him regret what he said. So now you're getting the Crimson side of things. You're getting some responses from those guys as well. Building up to what I felt like was completely dead probably a month ago, and it might have even been closer maybe when we got off the kickoff of FSU versus Alabama. This should be one that is buzzed across the entire country, and nothing was being said until Thomas Castellanos came out and said a few things.
I don't think you can fault Tommy Castellanos necessarily. I mean, this is a guy who, like you said, has always played with a lot of energy, a lot of emotion, has a chip on his shoulder. And, I also think when you're a quarterback who's sub 6 foot and you're playing at the highest level of college football, you've got to have a certain amount of cockiness, of delusion to go get it done. I mean, that's just how it is when you're one of those smaller guys. You got to take every single bit of motivation that you can get. Now, on the flip side, maybe Castellanos did commit a little bit of a quote-unquote cardinal sin here by putting these comments out in the dead of summer, where this is the only thing for not only Florida State fans to talk about and Alabama fans to talk about, but also, the country as well. National media are jumping on these comments ahead of the season because we're in the dead of the summer. I mean, there's not much going on as far as storylines. And, when you get something like this, a guy coming out this open with comments like these, a lot of people are going to jump on the back of that and, let their opinion about those comments. And, we've seen some people back Tommy Castellanos, and then we've seen others, now Mark Ingram and some of those Alabama players responding, not too happy about those comments. But, it's a little bit of push and pull, I guess. Castellanos, like you said, probably trying to fire his squad up, give them some motivation ahead of this season opener. And, it's certainly going to add some more fire on both sides going into that game.
I think these comments would have made the rounds even if it wasn't the dead of summer, just because it is Florida State coming off the 2-10 season, going against Alabama, and a quarterback that's playing for Florida State the first time is making these comments against a power like Alabama. These comments would have been national no matter what. It's just, obviously it's escalated because of when he said it's more than 2 months out from the game. Alabama is certainly not going to forget those comments once it comes down to that weekend. I'm sure there'll be a lot of printed out quotes in lockers in Tallahassee that weekend. but it definitely makes the game more interesting and has a little bit more juice to it that it maybe didn't have, a few weeks ago, which should be exciting at the very least.
Yeah, I was sharing some texts with people, also talking with my dad about it. And I was like, you go from Jordan Travis, a guy that showed you on the field wasn't a big vocal guy as well. In practices, though, we can share that now, D-Lou. We were there for those. Jordan Travis, he'll talk and let you know. And that was whenever Jared Verse was also being his ear as well, and Patrick Payton. But now then you go over to DJU, complete silence, which I couldn't stand at all. And then you go in the complete reverse and you go to Tommy Castellanos, where he's dropping bombs, where we had to check if this was a parody account who was tweeting these quotes about Thomas Castellanos. I was like, whoa, kind of like, hold on real quick. Get ready for this ride, because you knew there would be a response from Alabama players. You had Kelby Collins, 6'4", 285 defensive lineman, responding to it, laughing at it. Also, too, a recent 5-star linebacker commit, Xavier Griffin there, D-Lou, who FSU was in the mix for there. He also was laughing at Thomas Castellanos' comments, and defensive end Levius T. Overton responded with whatever an upside down smiling emoji is. Maybe just not so happy about the comments. I don't know. But it was funny to see a couple of the defensive lineman guys responding. And then you also had Alabama quarterbacks Ty Simpson and Austin Mack also engaging with the post. But those defensive linemen sure have seen that. And now it's like, hey, Tommy to his offensive line and Herb Hand, hey, by the way, you're going to have some angry guys coming after me whenever this game kicks off. And I love it, man. That's the juice that you should have if you want to be a team that is garnering its respect again. Show up and play and back it up on the field, and we'll see if Tommy Castellanos can do that. But like y'all were saying, I think it's just added at least some kind of buzz to this FSU Alabama game. I mean, I feel like the whole thing right now is just talking about the stadium and the disappointment of the renovations, and everything's awful. We got to paint the bleachers, a video board. What's going on with the audio in the stadium? I want to talk about Florida State versus F in Alabama, and thank you, Tommy Castellanos, for doing that. Danny Cannell, though, had some comments on it. He's bringing up what Bobby Bowden, how it used to go for him, being coached by the legend Bowden. He said, Coach Bowden used to always tell us, specifically around Miami and Florida week, he'd be like, all right, there's going to be a bunch of media attention. Let's make sure we're only saying nice things about the opponent. Don't give them anything to fuel their fire. Don't give them any bullets, more material. I guess it's so early in the offseason, you don't think it could happen. And the week of the game, you're a little bit more careful. He said, why give them any added motivation? If anything, you want a sneak attack. You want them to overlook you and think you're not good, as opposed to, which woke them up a little bit. He kicked the hornet's nest, if you will. That's what Tommy Castellanos just did. He kicked the hornet's nest, and he's about to find out if he can run away from them or not. Run away from them. I don't like that ending of the quote there from old Cannell. Run away from them. Interesting. I don't like it.
I think he's got a little bit of a point, just because, like we talked about, Florida State coming off the down year, have made so many changes. You don't really know exactly what these Seminoles are going to look like whenever they hit the field on August 30th. That gave the opportunity a little bit for Alabama, maybe this to be a little bit of a sleepy season opener where they come into Tallahassee and then bang, they're suddenly woken up against a Florida State team that looks a lot different than they did a year ago. But now, no matter what, Alabama is going to be dialed in on August 30th and ready to go for this football game. And it's going to be up to Florida State, to take that step and ultimately challenge them. A couple of years ago, whenever this game was scheduled, this was projected to be a marquee non-conference game, potentially between two top 10 teams. And Florida State, honestly, is the one that kind of screwed the pooch there with how last season went, and now not coming into the season ranked. Alabama obviously going to be in that AP preseason top 25 somewhere, probably around top 15, maybe around that 10 range. Florida State, they got a challenge on their hands. And now with Castellanos, becoming so vocal about this matchup, 2 months before these teams hit the field, it's got to be the Seminoles that bring the edge and make this a game.
It'll be interesting to see how the rest of the FSU team responds, because we know Alabama is going to try to respond to it. But how is Florida State going to step up to kind of defend their quarterback and his comments a little bit? Is everyone else going to show up to the party, or are they going to just be the same old Florida State that we saw last year and kind of just roll over and die?
That's what I was wondering too. I was wondering if anybody else was going to step in and say anything else. I mean, a lot of these guys aren't going on podcasts and going out and doing national interviews and such, but maybe we'd see some social media posts, which we've certainly seen in years past as well. But, Norvell has usually ran a pretty tight ship. And I've also wondered what the reaction of Mike Norvell was to Tommy's comments, and what he thought of it. And, Mike's brought in a new coaching staff. He's got Gus Malzahn, someone who we think, going to practices that got cut off, probably, highly in favor of what Gus Malzahn wanted to do there. I don't know. I mean, this is just a guy that has a ton of confidence. If you go back, though, he coached Cam Newton. If you want to talk about someone with some massive confidence in himself, a guy that will chirp and talk and let you know, that's something Cam Newton did in his early days of his football career as well. So this might not be something really that much new to Gus Malzahn either, but it is definitely newer to Mike Norvell in this current state of under Mike Norvell's tenure at Florida State. Having a quarterback like this is very, very interesting. The only thing you can go back to is going back to, Jameis Winston, whenever he'd make his posts or he'd say a few things, but then he'd put out there the Death Valley tweet saying this is his home, and then Doak South, like those were incredible, but he also backed it up, and so now a lot of things are on the shoulders of Thomas Castellanos and also to his team. But I go back to where I think he's trying to build confidence across the locker room, because this is a new team. And you go 2-10 like that, you got to try to reset some things. And either he feels like this team had a really good spring and there's some confidence there that they can show up and play, or that's about it. I mean, there's no other way he needs to think about it. It just needs to be straightforward. And he's feeling good about this FSU team going into this game next month.
Yeah, I think Florida State probably wishes he would have built that confidence behind the scenes, not made it so public. I don't think that they necessarily expected this situation, whenever that interview with On3 occurred, especially because Florida State, like you mentioned, with their media relations team and everything, they're very careful with the players, and they obviously teach them and coach them about what to say to the media about certain topics. So I think maybe Tommy Castellanos kind of went off the page a little bit, but now it is what it is. In Florida State, I mean, they're going to have to respond and be ready to go in 2 months.
Let's ride, baby. Let's ride. Let's keep moving on in here. We got a lot of recruiting to go over. Florida State landing multiple legacy guys, and one that could be committing here either live on the show or later this afternoon. But let's get started, and let's go, D-Lou, with the first one here on the production sheet. Florida State landing 4-star tight end Xavier Tiller. This was a big one here. I mean, Florida State still continuing to add there on the offensive side of the ball, but he committed to the Seminoles over Auburn and Alabama. He recently visited Tallahassee on June 13th to the 15th. He was originally committed to Texas A&M and reopened his recruitment earlier in the year, and giving FSU a chance to seal the deal, D-Lou.
Yeah, Xavier Tiller hopping on board to Tribe 26. This is an absolutely massive addition for Florida State. Tiller, one of Florida State's, well, arguably their top tight end target on the board. And, going into this announcement, the Seminoles were competing against Alabama and Auburn. It felt like maybe the Crimson Tide and the Tigers had the edge a little bit going into last month, but Florida State able to get Tiller to Tallahassee for that official visit. Seemed like they made quite the impression during his couple of days on campus, where, he got to spend some time around the coaching staff and meet some of the players as well, see what could be his future home. And then, a couple of days later, goes off the board, commits to Florida State. And, we were talking about it on the show last week. FSU finally landing their quarterback, bringing in 4-star Jaden O'Neal to Tribe 26 after his recent Oklahoma decommitment. And, in my opinion, there are recruits around the country that would be excited to play at Florida State with Jaden O'Neal. And we've quickly seen that over these last couple of days on that offensive side of the ball. Not only Landon Tiller, but, a couple of other guys, a couple wide receivers and offensive linemen that we'll get into. We're quickly seeing this 2026 class rise in the right direction.
When you got a quarterback with an arm like he does, it definitely will attract you some talent there. But I think that's a solid pickup for Florida State and definitely in the state of Georgia. How about Chris Thompson too, man? I mean, he continues to bring in some talent there. If you think about it, we're expecting hopefully a big season ahead for Landon Thomas. But they've got some youngsters there as well. I know in the transfer portal, that's the transfer portal. A lot of that relied on UCF and the ties there for Gus. But, you've got a tight end room with Randy Pittman now. Like, there's that kind of continues to reload. And that's one of the top rooms we're going to be talking about as we go into fall camp, I do believe.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe a little bit under the radar, but I think, Florida State has recruited at tight end as well as anybody these last couple of years. Landon Thomas, Amari Williams coming in. Obviously, you landed Chase Lofton, a true freshman who's going to be on the roster this season. You get Tiller's commitment here, and it seems like Florida State trending in the right direction for 3-star tight end Landon Myrie as well to add to this 2026 class. Then yesterday they added a tight end to that 2027 class. So I mean, already getting done in the future. Chris Thompson, working in the present and the future.
Love it. Let's keep moving here. Florida State landing a legacy here. A lot of everybody in this chat are going to know this name. Dexter Carter's son, Devin Carter, a 2026 wide receiver ranked as a 4-star on 247 Sports, commits to the Seminoles, a top 15 wide receiver. Tim Harris Jr. gets another stud in the wide receiver room, 6 foot 175. Your thoughts on this pickup here for the Seminoles, someone who's flip-flopped around a little bit in his recruiting path?
Yeah, this guy, in my opinion, Devin Carter, one of the best wide receivers in this Tribe 26 class, and an absolutely, a huge get for the Seminoles to continue building up this offense in the recruiting cycle. And, I think most people remember Carter was actually previously committed to Florida State, pledged to the Seminoles in April of 2023, and then decommitted from FSU in January of 2024. So, that was before the 2024 season debacle. And, I think a lot of that at the time was just because of Florida State's lack of consistent development of wide receivers under former position coach Ron Dugans. And, obviously we've seen the switch from Dugans to Tim Harris Jr. over these last couple of months. And Carter was a frequent visitor to Tallahassee this offseason, made it down a couple of times for unofficial visits, dropped by back in the spring to watch Harris Jr. Work with those wide receivers out there on the practice field. And it seemed like he saw enough in the end to feel comfortable, repledging to Florida State, developing under Harris Jr. at the college level. And it's going to be really exciting now to see another Florida State legacy follow in his father's footsteps in Tallahassee.
Moving on here, sticking into the wide receiver room, this is where VZ is going to step in too as well with some recruiting, because it has to do on the basketball court as well. And we were in the production meeting, and these gentlemen were telling me I can't sleep on this young kid. The rankings are the rankings, but this might be an absolute stud that the Florida State Seminoles were able to land with Jason Lopez, a 3-star wide receiver in the 2026 class. 5'10", 165 pounds, which when you say that number, and, I didn't have enough time to look at the film, see what the numbers are looking like on the basketball court. But I was told in the production meeting, don't sleep on this young man at 5'10", 165. Tell me what Florida State might be getting here with this guy that's a hybrid athlete.
Yeah, this is one that I didn't necessarily see coming. Some of these other guys that Florida State has landed as of late were publicly trending to the Seminoles. And this one with 4-star wide receiver Jason Lopez, it was a Florida State-Miami battle. Lopez down there in South Florida plays at Chaminade Madonna, one of the top prep programs in the country, and also, the high school that produced Ohio State wide receiver Jeremiah Smith, who, we all know what he was able to do during that 2024 season with the Buckeyes as they went on to win the national championship. But Florida State, head-to-head with Miami, another feather in the cap for Tim Harris Jr. here, picking up not only Lopez, we just talked about Devin Carter. They got Brandon Bennett a couple of weeks ago, beating the Florida Gators for his commitment. and then previously landed Ephraim White and Darion Williams, who locked down his recruitment with Florida State last month as well. So, I mean, out there at wide receiver, you've got 5 guys committed who are all 4-star prospects, and I think that goes to show that Tim Harris Jr. has made a very positive impact on the recruiting trail at Florida State so far. But getting back to Lopez, I think if this guy was 3 or 4 inches taller, I mean, he'd probably be a 5-star recruit, not only in football, but maybe in basketball as well. I'll have VZ back me up here in a second. But during his junior season on the football field last year, 87 catches, 1,300 yards, 14 touchdowns, also scored 2 touchdowns on the ground. And during his prep career, he scored 8 touchdowns on special teams. I mean, this is a guy,
wow.
A ton of speed, a ton of athleticism. Kind of reminds me of Javon Boggs, but just even more speed and athleticism off the jump. Very polished as a wide receiver, very fluid, and I think he's going to be one that could be very fun to watch in Garnet Gold.
Yeah, it's rare for a guy that's especially a 2-sport athlete on the basketball side to be 5'10", 170 pounds basically, and still be a 4-star prospect. That just doesn't happen a lot in basketball unless you're really talented, and he is really, really talented in both sports. I'm curious to see how his college career plays out and which one ends up being the more really valued sport for him, which one he's going to put his focus in. It was hard for me not to compare him to Walter Clayton Jr. from Florida this year. I think Lopez is a little more athletic, but the fearlessness is there in both players. And Clayton just went 18th overall in the NBA draft last week. There's a lot of fearlessness in his game that it really just comes from being a smaller guard. And like Clayton is a 2-sport athlete. Clayton played both football and basketball in high school, but decided to focus on basketball instead, going to Iona first and then transferring to Florida. But there's similarities in both of those guys for sure. And I'm excited that Laux can kind of develop this guy. I said this on Twitter after he committed. I'm willing to see the humor in Coach Laux saying, "Hey, Florida State's a football school. We always will be." And then his first 4-star is a football recruit. But it happens.
And I mean, to your point on his attitude and how he plays out there on the court, there's a highlight going around from this past season where, remember, we're talking about a 5'10", 165-pound guy. He goes up and dunks over 2 people on the basketball court. So, I mean, you got a high flyer coming in, even if he's sub 6 foot.
I need that clip. Where's that? Is that on Twitter? I
put it in the Discord a while back, but you were probably on one of your vacations. I'll have to go look.
One of my vacations. DM me. Someone send me that. Send me that, and I'll pull it up here on the screen because I need to see that. If I would have seen that before we went into the show, I'd have been like, oh, let's put him into the top. We got to talk about this young man. But I mean, that's a nice pickup for both Luke Laux and Tim Harris Jr. and the offensive side of the ball for Mike Norvell and Gus Malzahn moving forward. It seems to be a little bit of a theme here offensively. Definitely when you do grab your future at quarterback there with Jaden O'Neal, like those things usually are a domino effect. And you're starting to get some targets, some talent in the tight end room, the wide receiver room. I'd like to see how we're looking there in the future of the offensive line, and also some things in the running back room as well. But a lot of that is going to be relied on Usman Kromah in the next few seasons, as they put in a lot of their, I should say, resources into making that flip in the early signing day period from Georgia over to FSU with Kromah. But this is, and I think you see the responses on Twitter too. When Florida State does land somebody, the immediate reaction in the comments is, doesn't matter, wait till signing day, they will flip. And I will say, that sometimes is a theme, and it's been that way for Mike Norvell with some of these guys. But a lot of the FSU this last class, if they hadn't have gone 2-10, a lot of those guys would have stuck. And just got to hope Florida State is able to have a season where it's respected, and you're at an 8 win potential, which would be impressive. And that keeps a lot of recruits around, I would imagine, moving forward. Let's jump over to another one here. This is on the offensive line, and this is Jacoby Green, a 3-star guy that committed to Florida State after decommitting from Mississippi State. He actually had an official visit a few weeks ago, and then also to the Seminoles offered Green in late May. And what are y'all's thoughts on that? Local guy out of Gadsden County, but previously played in Niceville and at the same school that AZ played at as well, but held some offers from Florida, Miami, Boston College, Ole Miss, Wake Forest, UCF, and some others. 6'3", 335. Big boy.
Yeah, solid pickup for Florida State here to continue building out that offensive line class. Obviously, we talked about it some last week, but you've had some other targets at offensive tackle and the interior commit to other programs. And as Florida State, opening up the board a little bit and landing a guy in Jacoby Green, who, as you mentioned, Logan, is a local guy out of Gadsden County High School. And, he'll be playing there for his senior season, but brings excellent size to the table. You also mentioned that 6'3", 335 pounds, likely going to play along the interior at the college level. But, officially visited Florida State last month. Mississippi State got his final official visit. But either way, a couple of days after that, Green decommitted from the Rebels and decided to stay closer to home with the Seminoles. And I think this one is pretty cool because Jacoby Green grew up a Florida State fan. And, he had a nice little picture there on social media of him a couple of years ago. I mean, it would have been probably late middle school or maybe even early in his high school days, but a picture of him with Mike Norvell then, and then a picture of him, now where he's a rising senior and, has that size that we talked about, looked a lot different. So, I mean, cool to see a guy who grew up as a fan of FSU now get the opportunity to suit up in garnet and gold when he signs with the Seminoles in December.
I just found the tweet. It wasn't one to show to me, but now I've got it, and we're going to watch this Jason Lopez kid dunk on somebody, because that's
two bodies.
Part of basketball. Two bodies. Here we go. I think I got it here. Let me put down the comment so then that doesn't hide Dustin's reaction. Is double dunk. 5'10". Oh my, who's yelling? Y'all can't hear that, but oh my gosh, whoever just yelled just broke my eardrums. Oh God, I wish I would have had the audio in that, because that is incredible. But yeah, no, that kid can dunk, man. At 5'10", he's got some hops on him. VZ, can you guard that? Could you guard that back when your hips were good?
Probably not.
No.
No. Defense was never really my specialty. Nico Harrison wouldn't have been very pleased with my basketball skills.
No, yeah, he would have let you go. You would not have made it. But speaking of Nico Harrison, now this isn't a Mavericks podcast, so we won't dive deeper into that, actually. But hey, you got Cooper Flagg, baby. Let's go. Let's keep going. Another legacy guy here, and I mean, I got the Steelers stuff on. I got the Steelers back here.
You got to be fired up about this one.
Oh, I'm fired. This has been a great week, even though this happened a little while ago. Still a great, phenomenal week for us up there in the black and gold, up in the Berg. Florida State lands 4-star legacy cornerback Jay Timmons. His dad, I mean, when you hear Timmons, you immediately know the Lawrence Timmons, one of the hardest on the field. He will hit you and he will hurt you. And now his son is doing the same thing, but as a cornerback. But the Seminoles were able to make a big time. Was this a flip?
Yep, flip from Indiana.
I mean, who wants to live in Indiana anyways? But anyways, thoughts on this pickup here, man. I mean, this is solid. You love to see this. 5'11", 185 pounds on both sides of the ball, specifically on defense, as a junior at Pine Richland High School. Standout on both sides of the ball, 42 tackles on defense, 3 tackles for loss, 1 sack, 3 forced fumbles, 10 pass deflections, 2 fumble recoveries, returned for touchdowns, and 4 interceptions, which 2 of them were returned for touchdowns. And then he also on offense had 40 catches for 755 yards, 8 touchdowns. Also had 8 carries for 108 yards. Also returned both punts and kickoffs. He practically did everything. Did he punt and kick? Like, so he never had time off practically on the field, it seems like.
Yeah, he's a playmaker, and out there from Pennsylvania. But either way, I mean, this is another one where I think it's just a really fun story for Florida State. Obviously a legacy recruit, and his dad was a great linebacker at Florida State. Went on to have a heck of an NFL career with the Pittsburgh Steelers. But in the story, of Jay Timmons, this was a guy who had come to Florida State previously, over the past couple summers to work out, hadn't got that scholarship offer from the Seminoles. And he came back last month in June for another one of those camps. Really impressed Florida State with his performance out there. They went ahead and extended him the scholarship offer, got him set up for the official visit. And then, I mean, after he made it to Tallahassee for that official, it just kind of felt like a matter of time. With Florida State giving him the green light, a guy who wanted to be here in Tallahassee, follow in his father's footsteps. And, actually Timmons now becomes the third legacy recruit in Florida State's Tribe 26 class. It's very impressive. And, once again, you go to this defensive backfield class that Florida State is starting to fill out. Jay Timmons hops on board. You previously landed 4-star safety Tadarius Hughes, 4-star safety Darrell Bell, and 3-star cornerback Sean Johnson. And then Florida State obviously finds itself trending for 5-star cornerback Chauncey Kennan, who's set to decide on July 6th. And the Seminoles seem to be the favorite in that recruitment as of now. That'd be the first 5-star commitment in this class if FSU is able to land Kennan. But Patrick Surtain, Mike Norvell doing it once again in that defensive backfield on the recruiting trail.
Look at this shot here, which I love. First off, this uniform combination is absolutely beautiful. The pants, the jersey, the trim, the helmets, actual true gold with the glimmer. And I mean, this is just a great fit. But here's Lawrence Timmons. And one of my favorites, this should be Buster Davis, correct? This should be Buster.
Think so.
The chat can extra confirm that. But these two right here, absolute legends at FSU. Buster Davis being one of my favorites to ever. When I was younger, Buster Davis was one of the big recruits that came in. FSU was able to land, and just to see that number 7 on a linebacker was kind of rare at the time a little bit, but to see Buster Davis right there next to Lawrence Timmons, I mean, then to see him play as I was growing up, becoming a Pittsburgh Steeler fan, and this career that he was able to have. And when you think of Lawrence Timmons, you think of physicality, nasty, and that kind of build. I mean, absolute legend. And now the linebacker position has changed so much across football as a whole. But this photo right here from Cameron Miller, who's always done a fantastic job of grabbing shots. This right here was awesome. I thought I'd bring that up here on the screen. And what a get, though, D-Lou, for the Seminole. I mean, this guy is uber talented, and it seems like we're seeing a big, strong theme of that across the board of the type of talent that Florida State's bringing in currently. Let's move on to the next one. Why don't we? And let's jump over to another tight end for Chris Thompson. Another tight end, man. And this time it is going to be Connor Wynn, a 3-star guy in the Tribe 27 class. So looking ahead, way ahead here. But the Seminoles added him there, which is going to put Florida State in a pretty high spot now in that 2027 class. But thoughts on this one here? 6'3", 215 pounds, D-Lou.
What a win for Florida State to where'd I go? What happened?
Yeah, now you're gone. See you later, man. Have fun.
Oh, man. Oh. But
yeah, what a win. Goodbye.
What a win for Florida State. They land 3-star tight end Connor Wynn, and this is a guy committed to Rutgers in July of 2024, recently backed off of that decision shortly after he picked up an offer from Florida State. So Wynn was in Tallahassee last month, competed at a 7-on-7 camp, and picked up an offer from Florida State shortly thereafter. And, he was committed to Rutgers at the time, but after picking up that offer from the Seminoles, decided to decommit from Rutgers and then now pledged to Florida State to join that Tribe 27 class. And this is a guy missed his sophomore season due to an injury, but has rehabbed, recovered, got back on the field, and obviously impressed Florida State with what he was able to do during that 7-on-7 camp. And back during spring football a couple of months ago in a scrimmage against Seminole High School, one of the top teams in the state of Florida, Wynn had 8 catches for 136 yards and a score in just 3 quarters of action. So I think go ahead and get him on the board. You've now got 3 commitments in that 2027 class for Florida State, move up from number 8 back to number 5 in the country. And then, this one kind of felt like it came a little bit out of nowhere yesterday, right before I went to the gym. But either way, a quality addition for Florida State as they can continue to make some nice strides, early in that Tribe 27 class. Obviously, we talked about Jalen Scott flipping to Auburn a couple weeks ago, Cornelius Purdy backing off his commitment to Florida State. But now, they get another recruiting win in their pocket.
Good one. Using one more thing there, no pun intended, with the win. Did the commitment come before you went to the gym or while you were at the gym or on the way?
15 minutes before I left. So.
Okay. Well, that's good. That's better than usual. We're heading in a better direction here, but usually this happens whenever we're way away from our computers and things happen where we have to do it on the go for the most part. But yes, solid pickup there for 2027. Before we move on to a potential big time pickup for Florida State on the defensive line, we've got over 60 of y'all watching here on YouTube. If you smash that like button, we deeply appreciate it. It goes out to more FSU fans. And I think we're around like 20 something likes right now. But if we get up to 50, it would be freaking awesome. But let's keep on going down this production sheet. And let's go over to a big time prediction here for the Seminoles from On3's Steve Wiltfong, saying that the Seminoles potentially later today will be landing a top 5 defensive lineman in the 2026 class. Ernest Rankins, who is 6'6", 285 pounds, with a lot, and I should say a lot of schools across the country wanting him, with some big-time names here in close contention for Rankins. You've got Alabama, you've got Georgia, you've got Ohio State, the big dogs. But it seems like Florida State and Terrence Knighton, who we're going to have a big conversation of, depends on if this commitment is going to happen while we're live or on next week's show. We're going to have a good conversation about FSU Twitter, who gave him a hard time about his recruiting efforts if he lands this young man a top 5 defensive lineman in the country. And you know how much I love defensive linemen. Big Knighton, you get it done. I'm all on board, baby. Let's get it going. But right now, it seems like Florida State's got a good one coming their way with Tony White and Terrence Knighton on the defensive side of the ball.
Even if he doesn't get it done, Florida State and Terrence Knighton have kind of quieted the criticism a little bit, especially, it was starting to heat up there right around that early middle of June. And then Florida State started having some success there on that defensive line in Tribe 26, previously landed 4-star defensive lineman Tico Crittenden Jr., also 4-star James Carrington, and 3-star Whitley Cadeau. So you've got a solid foundation there in Tribe 26. And, if you're able to add another guy in Ernest Rankins, who, probably going to play along the interior at the college level, but also has the flexibility to bounce out to that defensive end position as well. I mean, it would be really nice. This is a guy who had been trending to Auburn as of late, but Florida State, has been pushing here, trying to get that top spot in his recruitment, and now, trending in the right direction shortly before his announcement later today. Was in Tallahassee for that official visit last month. Previously saw some of his other contenders this summer as well. But it seems like the Seminoles are the team that's emerging as the focal point as we get closer to that announcement. And, we'll see if he becomes the latest recruit to join that Tribe 26 class. If he does, it would push Florida State back to the top 10 of the recruiting rankings, sitting at number 11 at the moment. But either way, like I said, I think this could be a productive couple of days for the Seminoles, not only with rankings deciding, but you've got 5-star cornerback Chauncey Kennan coming up on July 6th, 3-star defensive end Chris Addison, another guy that Florida State's trending for. Hasn't said a public announcement, but that feels like something that could come in the next couple of days. And there's still some wide receivers on the board. Florida State, like we mentioned earlier, already got 5 of them committed, but you've got 5-star wide receiver Calvin Russell making his decision on Saturday night. Florida State, one of the final 4 teams involved in that recruitment. And then still kind of up in the air with 4-star wide receiver Kean Chapman. That one's down to Florida State and North Carolina. His brother, who's also in the 2026 class, committed to North Carolina last week. And Chapman has received some predictions in favor of the Tar Heels. But either way, it sounds like Florida State, still in the hunt here. And, if Chapman wants to jump on board with Tribe 26, Florida State would certainly take him into the fold.
Oh boy, that's great momentum. That's great momentum, and definitely when you're able to jump into that defensive line, which I think has been lacking for a good long while, at least on the high school recruiting level front. I think landing a good bit of strong talent in the trenches is uber essential to any football program, and if you go over to the league as well, if you want to get to Super Bowls, if you want to get national championships, it starts in the trenches and definitely on that defensive side of the ball, in my opinion.
And that's really, sorry to cut you off, but that's really the 2 areas where Florida State needs to finish stacking up this Tribe 26 class. Still looking for a true offensive tackle. You've had multiple targets commit elsewhere. We talked about, I think, legacy recruit Aaron Thomas last week. He committed to Ohio State a couple of days ago over Florida State. So, still searching for a guy there. And I think the biggest thing as far as the defensive side of the ball is bringing in some defensive ends. You might be able to land a guy who I just mentioned in 3-star Chris Addison, but it certainly hurts to be eliminated by 5-star Trenton Henderson, one of the top recruits in the state of Florida.
Let's keep rolling on here. And, there was a question in the chat about it from my guy Philip here, talking about Jalen Ramsey to the Pittsburgh Steelers. This happened on Monday, which was huge for, I think, the NFL as a whole, but definitely for us on the Pittsburgh side of things. And yes, we did lose Minkah Fitzpatrick. This trade was dealt Monday morning. Jonnu Smith from the Miami Dolphins and Jalen Ramsey going in a trade to the Steelers, and then Minkah Fitzpatrick, an all-pro guy at the safety position, going back to the Miami Dolphins where he played previously in his career. That's the trade that happened, and there was some smoke. We had talked about it on here covering this trade. We had known all along that Jalen Ramsey wanted to go on a trade. Miami were willing to deal him, and sure enough, they did. We were thinking potentially this could have been a reunion for Jalen Ramsey back in LA with the Rams, maybe even the Chargers there, which would have been crazy with Derwin James. Could you imagine how that could have looked? But then it so happened to be that the Pittsburgh Steelers make a big stunning one there and grab Jalen Ramsey, and just being a guy that spent a little bit of time behind the scenes with Jalen. And then, of course, seeing him do what he did with the Jaguars, and he got his big bag there. And then you got the kind of attitude that he has. He's a fun one. He's an interesting one and fun one, but I thought he didn't have too bad of a season last year either. And if he could stay fully healthy for us, I feel good about it. And also got Jonnu Smith out of it as well, matching him with Arthur Smith, our offensive coordinator, who I am not the highest on. I will be honest with you there, but I think overall, talent-wise, I think we won. And the trade, obviously we won. But I feel pretty damn good just to have Jalen Ramsey, a guy like that. Like we were just talking about Lawrence Timmons, having someone from FSU on my side, again, is always nice and feels good. Visa, your thoughts on the trade as a neutral guy? You're up there in the Vikings. This doesn't have any kind of impact on you so you're not a Ravens fan. And you're not a Bengals fan, and you're not a Browns fan. So what's your honest take on it?
I'm curious to see if he plays at safety at all, because I think everyone kind of expects that to be the next move in his career at some point, to follow that Charles Woodson route where he goes from lockdown corner to just elite safety as he ages. I'm curious to see if that's what he does or if he stays at corner. If he stays at corner, your cornerback room is old as hell outside of Joey Porter Jr. with Jalen Ramsey and Darius Slay out there. Really, the entire Pittsburgh Steelers team is becoming a retirement home at this point with Aaron Rodgers on board. Yeah. It's an old team. A lot of old geezers out there. But it
Old geezers.
it should be fun.
A lot of old geezers. Yeah, Darius Slay, older guy for sure. Joey Porter Jr., one thing about him, too many penalties last year. Got to do better there in that cornerback room from him. But we'll see how they use Jalen Ramsey. I do think the smarter route, put him back where in the safety position. You know, they were talking about it. I think there was some sources said somewhere that they felt like they found, an upgrade from Minkah Fitzpatrick. And if that's the case, and I think that they're going to use him in some kind of hybrid role like that, and we'll see what they'll do if they want to have him as a corner like that. Or you brought in Darius Slay, so going to be very interesting to see how they utilize him. Still some things that we need to fix, and still got to find another wide receiver, but I think it's going to be pretty fun to see Jalen Ramsey in that black and gold Steelers games. And two, for my first Pittsburgh game at Pittsburgh, I might have been drinking a little bit. I had a good amount of beers. One of my friends here is a Pittsburgh Steeler fan. And a couple weeks ago, we randomly bought Steelers home game, Monday Night Football, where the Miami Dolphins come up there to
That's so random.
Heinz Field. It was completely random. Like I said, probably a couple too many IPAs deep, but those are always the best feeling ever when sometimes though, a little expensive, but when you wake up in the morning, like, wow, I just bought tickets to go to a football game so long on December 15th or something like that. And just so happens to be that
Monday night December game. Oh, you were going.
Oh, it's going to be cold, baby. It's going to be cold. I've always said this. If I'm going to go to my first ever at Pittsburgh game, I'm not going to no damn press box. I'm not doing I'm going to a game, and I'm going to go sit out there in those stands, and I want it to be cold. I want snow coming down on me. Now we'll see how much I regret that going into the second quarter, and I'm freezing my ass off. But when you have enough beers, you're going to be just fine. You'll be just fine, and we're going to drink ourselves through it. And if we're winning, I don't care. Renegade in the fourth quarter, flying off. TJ Watt just demolished Tua. That's going to –
as long as he doesn't get traded.
Shut up. Don't talk like that. Don't say silly things like that on this show. This is not a silly show. Well, it is. But anyways, yeah, I'm stoked. I'm hyped for it. And I got Jalen Ramsey in Pittsburgh with us, playing for Mike Tomlin. Let's keep going here. Now we're off to basketball, baby, because basketball, we got a lot on basketball too. I mean, we've got Jameer Watkins finding his NBA home. Luke Laux on the recruiting trail. We got Terrence Mann finding a new home as well, and a 3-team trade. And then Malik Beasley. What the heck's going on? But let's start off with Jameer Watkins, Beasley. He gets picked in the second round to the Washington Wizards. Thoughts on that pickup there for the former Seminole?
Yeah, I'm first of all super happy for Jameer Watkins. Becomes Leonard Hamilton's 20th and final draft pick as the head coach of Florida State. First Florida State draft pick since 2021 when Scotty Barnes, Raekwon Gray, and Balsha Koprivica were all selected. Super happy for him, first of all. It's always good to have a Florida State guy in the league, especially someone like this that, started his career at VCU, went through a torn ACL, then transfers to Florida State and really blossoms on the scene as an all ACC caliber guy. Was electric for Florida State the last 2 years, and to have it be paid off with being a mid-second round pick, I think is awesome. Just an awesome development story. The fit is interesting because the Wizards are a very young, very bad team. But they have a few veteran leaders with Chris Middleton and Dustin's favorite player, Marcus Smart. They have a couple veterans that can help lead him along the way as he develops. I imagine he hasn't signed any contract yet, and it may be a few weeks before that happens. I imagine he'll be on a 2-week contract for at least the first couple years, splitting time in the G League and the NBA roster. As really, I think he just needs to develop his 3-point shot, and if that happens, he can be an NBA player right away. I think he's got the size, he's got the strength, he's got the physicality, he's got the free throw ability. He's clearly got the defense, which I think is what every team is going, or what the Wizards are going to rely on him for mainly. It's going to be an interesting fit for sure. I almost nailed the selection. I had him going 39th to the Raptors, so I'll take him going 43rd, just a couple picks later. I consider that being close enough, especially in the second round where everything's just hectic and no one knows what's going on. And then as Dustin pointed out, it's pretty cool that Jameer Watkins, Leonard Hamilton's final draft pick, is going to the one NBA team that Leonard Hamilton coached for. So pretty cool full circle moment for everybody involved.
Awesome stuff. And yeah, like you said, I mean, all you can really do is congratulate Jameer for being drafted by the Wizards after 2 really fun years at Florida State. And, it's not going to surprise me if this is a guy who sticks around at the NBA level. Like you said, Austin, not only due to his defense, but, I also feel like he's got a pretty creative offensive game as well. And this is a guy who can create for himself off the dribble. Like you said, get to the free throw line and convert. Can't speak anymore, apparently. But either way, Jameer Watkins to the Wizards, and we're certainly going to be watching him.
I wish he chose a better number, because number 30 is just a weird number if you're not Stephen Curry. And it looks weird in those Washington Wizards jerseys. So hopefully he finds a better jersey number at some point in the next few years so I can get one. Really, the Wizards just need new jerseys in general.
I was going to say, does any number look good in the Washington Wizards?
Yeah, that's probably the bigger flaws. The Wizards just don't have good uniforms.
Mm-hmm. There's a funny comment here. Jesse saying, that's crazy. I just bought tickets to the Steelers game yesterday for me and my wife's anniversary. She's a Dolphin, and I'm a Steeler. We are both Noles. Heck yeah. See you up there, Jesse. We're going to have some beers. Let's meet up for that one. It's going to be cold, though. It's going to be
You're buying, chilly. Jesse.
Whoa. No. Depends on how many we're having, though. But let's keep on moving here. Luke Laux, very busy on the recruiting trail. VZ. And I put out a highlight of this guy with a dunk there from his Instagram. This guy from Russia.
Yeah.
What is going on here? What's Luke Laux up to, man?
Not just from
allowed?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he's allowed. There's a lot of European guys coming to the United States right now just because of NIL, and they can make more money playing in college than they could play in their home countries. I imagine that's what's going on here. But yeah, Igor Rizov, a 20-year-old 6'11" dude from Russia.
The machine.
I couldn't help but hear the Call of Duty Black Ops character. I forget his name now in this moment, but from Black Ops 1. But it's there was a lot of interest in Rizov. I believe Arkansas and Ole Miss were going after him pretty hard.
Victor Rezov?
Yes, Reznov. For some reason, those two names just are too similar to me. And as soon as I saw his name being floated around as an option, I'm like, huh, interesting. Mm-hmm. Yeah, 6'11", averaged 15 points, about 8 rebounds. He's a surprisingly decent playmaker. For a center, he's not going to be like anytime Florida State's gotten your overseas international big men, you're thinking these 7'2" lengthy guys that are really underdeveloped and still learning how to play basketball. This is the complete opposite in almost every single way. A little bit smaller for a center, I guess. Not really a shot blocker, average less than a block per game. But he's got great hands, great offensive fundamentals. And that's something Luke Laux is trying to prioritize with his centers. He wants guys that are skilled with the basketball and comfortable with the ball in their hands when they need to be. It's a really interesting addition. I'm curious to see how he's going to fit into this rotation that, has some big men with Alir Malouk and Shaheed Muhammad, but they don't really have a guy like this who can really be comfortable with the ball in his hands when you need him to be. And he's still surprisingly athletic. I posted a quick highlight clip right after he committed of him just reaching up for this lob that was behind and way over his head, and he was able to go up and get it. I think it's going to be a fun addition. I think having a guy that, it's going to be his first year on campus, but he's 20 years old already, is going to be some needed, valuable experience. A guy that's been playing pro basketball in Russia for the last few years. I think that's huge.
Mm-hmm. We need to see how everything comes together, but I think you got to give Luke Laux some credit for this roster that he's put together, not only through the transfer portal, but also on the high school recruiting front as well. Cautiously optimistic about this team, as we get closer and closer to his first season as the head coach in Tallahassee.
Yeah, I'm a little skeptical on the ceiling. I don't know that they'll be able to contend in every ACC game, but I think they've got a really high floor. And the way Laux wants to play, he mentioned on an interview last week that he really wants to play like Nate Oates does at Alabama, where they're just flying up and down the court, shooting and hitting a lot of threes. And, you can kind of see that with the way they've built this team, the shooters they've added, and just the skill overall that they've added. I think they'll win a couple games that they maybe shouldn't have. Mm-hmm. more than anything, I'm excited to see a different style of play after seeing the same Florida State offense for 10 years, basically.
I would love some up tempo.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they're trying to average 80, 85 points a game next year and just firing away, shooting more than 33s per game because that's what the NBA is, and that's where Laux is coming from. So
Missoula ball, baby.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all to see that happen. They've still got at least one roster spot open. Curious to see how they feel that. One of the guys that they're after is Cole Rosario. He just ended up committing to Kansas. So we'll end up seeing how they use that last spot, if it's someone that can play in this rotation.
Mm-hmm. Is there anybody else recruiting wise that we missed on for basketball?
I don't believe so. Since we talked about Lopez.
Okay, gotcha. That's true. And then moving on here to the NBA side, Terrence Mann, here the Spear alum, he got traded to the Brooklyn Nets in a 3-team trade, including Dustin Lewis's Boston Celtics.
He didn't go to the Celtics.
What happened?
He didn't go to the Celtics, so
no.
Which he would have loved.
They're involved. You wish so. You wish.
Terrence Mann is my favorite FSU basketball player. If he would have landed on the Celtics, instead we got freaking Niang. Yeah, if I saw that dude in the street, I'd take him down myself. Like,
whoa, yeah.
I do not like that dude one bit.
Oh,
yeah,
for real? You would fight him?
Niang's a lot cheaper.
Like you have someone you want to fight in NBA?
I got beef. He may be 6'8". I'll win. I don't care.
What'd he do? What'd he do to you?
He's just a dick. I just can't stand him. Now he's on my team. I've been tweeting at the Celtics like, trade this bum every day. Even if you go on Celtics Reddit, it's just people talking shit about George Niang.
Okay.
Well, they got him because he's a lot cheaper than Terrence Mann was. The total deal was Kristaps Porzingis and a second-round pick going to Atlanta, and then for Atlanta to offload salary, they sent Niang back to Boston, and then Terrence Mann, and I think it was a 22nd overall pick to Brooklyn. Terrence Mann's contract just isn't seen greatly around the NBA. He signed a 3-year, $46 million extension before last season, and it's just now kicking in for this year. And he's already been traded twice since signing that contract. The Clippers traded him to Atlanta, and then just a few months later, Atlanta turns around and trades him to Brooklyn. Fun fact, as he tweeted, he was born in a Brooklyn hospital, so in a sense, he's going home a little bit, even though he was raised in Massachusetts. I don't imagine Brooklyn will keep him for the long haul, just because that is, as we were just talking about with the Wizards, a very young, very bad team. I think he might be the oldest player on that roster right now. As I'm sitting here thinking about that, because they just traded for Michael Porter Jr., but I think he's older than Michael Porter Jr. And they didn't. It's just a young, bad team, and he might be the veteran leader on that team if they decide to keep him around. But it's a guy that he's still a good basketball player. I mean, even when he was playing for the Hawks last year, he was able to be a secondary shot creator, secondary playmaker, great defender. He's going to fit in any team if he's allowed to play for that team. So hopefully he gets a little more opportunities with Brooklyn than he did with Atlanta, because Atlanta just didn't really seem to want to play him much last year.
And you still got some FSU ties up there in Brooklyn. I think Dolkey's still on the
Dolkey's is an assistant coach there. I didn't think about that.
Jeff Peterson, right?
No, Peterson's the GM here in Charlotte.
Oh, okay. He was with the Nets, though.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, I forgot about Dolkey's being there.
What about over to Malik Beasley now? Finish this off.
Where
do we begin?
Yeah, where do we start with Malik Beasley?
He is currently under federal investigation for suspicious prop bet activity from games in January 2024 while with is this true? Is he with the Bucks?
Yeah, he was with the Bucks for 2 years.
Lucky Bucks then, okay. But no charges yet. His $42 million contract is on hold, a 3-year deal there with the Detroit Pistons.
Well, it's not on hold.
It's off the table because they just signed Duncan Robinson to the contract he was going to get.
Damn, that's tough. But he's facing also multiple lawsuits, sued by his former agency for $2.25 million over unpaid advance, and then owes money to a dentist, a barber, a landlord, and a major lender which is a $5.8 million judgment from 2022, and he's in financial trouble. Well, it just says here his financial trouble appears to be piling up quickly. Thank you, ChatGPT, there on that one. No shit. But yeah, thoughts on what's going on here with Malik Beasley? And he had also had some previous stuff going on the last couple of years as well off the court.
Yeah, real quick, I will say Terrence Mann is the oldest player on the Brooklyn Nets now by 2 years.
Wow.
Michael Porter Jr. is 27 and Terrence Mann's 29.
What happened?
I was about to say, like, T-Man's not even that old. Like,
I know.
Yeah.
But yeah, Malik Beasley. The gambling thing was the first thing to come out, and that just came out. Was it yesterday morning, 2 mornings ago?
Yeah.
And it has just been a cascade ever since. Apparently, he was prop betting on games in January of 2024. I think is what they're investigating. From his time with the Milwaukee Bucks. We have no way of knowing for not. I even tried going back and looking at some of the game logs to see if there was anything that stood out. There really wasn't, from what I could see. Like, there wasn't any prolonged stretches of, 2 of 15 shooting or something crazy like that. We'll see what comes of that. We've seen this go in both directions. Like, we've seen Jonte Porter get banned for life from the NBA for gambling as recently as 2 years ago, and then we saw Terry Rozier from the Miami Heat go under investigation, and they just found out he was bad at basketball. So we'll see what comes from this.
Oh man.
We'll see what comes from that investigation. It literally could not have come out at a worse possible time. It literally came out, I think, 4 hours before free agency started. So yeah, he went from possibly getting a 3-year, $42 million deal to, if this clears of any wrongdoing, he's maybe going to get lucky to get a minimum contract. It's just, it happened at the worst possible time for him. And then the next thing that came out, I think, was the dentist. And when you're owing money to your dentist, things just ain't it. I don't know what happened for you to have to. I don't know what happened for you to have to have money go directly from your NBA contract. Like, doesn't even hit his checking account. It goes straight to the dentist. Something bad happened along the way there for that to happen.
Something's up.
And my barber doesn't even let me get out the store without paying, so I don't know.
Yeah, well, apparently that barber helps a lot, or I shouldn't say helps, but they have a lot of NBA clients. So I'm assuming that's just something that happens where they get paid eventually.
Yeah.
And then the landlord in Detroit is actually Dan Gilbert, who's the owner, or was the owner of the Cleveland Cavaliers. I don't know if he still is. It's just not a great situation for Malik Beasley right now.
It almost feels calculated, just because, like you said, the free agency opens. He's about to get his extension with the Pistons.
And he was awesome for the Pistons last year. I mean, he finished second and sixth man of the year. Like, he had arguably his best year in his career.
All of this now breaks open. So, I mean, we'll just have to see how it goes. But, like you said, VZ, there's no longer really a spot for him to return to in Detroit, and money across the league is drying up quickly. I mean, after just a couple of days of free agency. It's
not like there was much money to begin with in the NBA. These new tax restrictions have a lot of teams really worrying about their cap flexibility for the future. So there's not, even if he's cleared of any wrongdoing, there's not going to be any team that's like, oh yeah, he's fine. Here's the same contract that Detroit was going to offer you. Like I said, he'll be lucky to get $5 million a year on his next contract.
Damn. Tough. Don't do that. Only let us be the ones that are betting, and we're getting close.
Don't investigate my bets, because they are bad.
Yeah, well, this is what happens when you merge professional sports and have sports gambling be the primary sponsors, in my opinion. As much as they can educate these guys, it's just going to be bound to happen.
Yep, and we've seen it happen. We've already seen it happen in college football, like college basketball and baseball, I think. Like, it's when you're competing in the sport, and especially when you're a young college athlete or someone who's, in their 20s, maybe early 30s, and then you're seeing all the commercials and all of the sponsored content for this betting stuff, and sign up here, you get free bonus bet or whatever. You're like, well, dang, why not me?
I could see you, Dustin, doing that if you had a college opportunity. If that would ever
I'm doing it right now, and it ain't working out well.
Well, I think that's going to do it for this week's show, ladies and gentlemen. Before y'all leave, smash that like button. Appreciate all of y'all hanging out with us this week. It is July. That means next month, Florida State has a football game, and we're getting close to fall camp, aren't we, D-Lou? We're inching closer and
Don't know.
closer. What, at the end of July? We don't have dates yet. We don't have dates, but FSU should be hitting the practice fields at the end of this month.
They could be
If my
practicing right now,
schedule-
for all I know.
They could be out there. We don't even know what's going on, really, honestly. But as long as Thomas Castellanos keeps giving us some juice, I'm here for it. Please do, kind sir. But that's going to do it. Appreciate y'all hanging out. Smack the like button and subscribe if you haven't yet. Got tons of content coming through for you guys as we inch closer and closer to Florida State's season opener in Doak Campbell Stadium against the Crimson Tide and Alabama. Y'all have a great rest of y'all's week, and we'll talk to you guys next week on Hear the Spear. Peace.